if you've been trying to manifest health, money, better relationships, and it's just not working, what we're going to talk about today is totally going to change the game for you. Your brain might actually be the thing blocking you from manifesting. So when we look into manifestation and we go on YouTube or we read books, we're always, but nobody ever addresses what thoughts actually are and why you're even having the thoughts that you have in the first place. So if you know a little bit about neuroscience and how the brain actually works, how the body actually works, and basic physiology, this is really going to make a lot of sense to you. So a lot of people try to change their thoughts with their thoughts, and they'll journal and they'll write it down and they'll do vision boards and all of that stuff. And while all of that is kind of helpful, if you really want to make that change, you have to start working with the base level of your body and your neuroscience. So every single organ system in your entire body, your heart, your liver, your intestines, your lungs, all of it is there to support your brain and your spinal cord. Your brain and your spinal cord are the first things that are formed when you're an embryo. It's called the neural tube, and when your body and your cells are kind of forming, that's the first thing. That's kind of when our consciousness has the opportunity to enter. And when you look at the brain and you look at the spinal cord, it kind of looks like an antenna. It looks like a really futuristic antenna, and that's really what it is. So when we're looking at consciousness is not just something that lives within your body. It's your body and your brain is a receiver for consciousness, and your brain is the filter for the highest frequency, the highest form out there, your highest, best version of yourself, and your brain and your neurology is the filter for that, right? So if we want to have better thoughts, if we want to have thoughts that are in alignment with our highest, best version of ourselves, we have to work on the filter. And the filter is not just how you think, right? Sure, you can do different kind of methodologies, psychological principles and techniques and things like that to kind of shift your thinking. But when we look at the evidence with that, it's not very promising. It doesn't really always happen on its own. But when we see and look at the people who make dramatic changes in their life, they might use some of those techniques. But when we see the dramatic change, they're also doing something else that affects their neurology. So things like exercise, right? Exercise creates endorphins in your body, kind of shifts your energy, but it also makes your brain more neuroplastic. It makes your brain capable of the ability to form new connections. And I think, in my personal opinion, that's why you see on YouTube a lot of people who are really into fitness, who are pretty healthy, gradually go into this space of self-improvement and manifestation and teaching you how to transform your reality with your thoughts. Because if you're healthy, this stuff is going to come a lot easier to you. If you're already creating an environment of neuroplasticity, when you do the techniques to change your thoughts, those thoughts are going to wire in a lot easier, right? Because those neurons have the ability to make the connection a lot easier because they're in a state where they can do that. And I think that's why you see a lot of fitness people going into this space a lot easier, because they kind of had this realization that it worked better for them. You see people who maybe had some addiction problem, things like that, and then they go to help, they go to meetings and try to change it, but they're always kind of living in that old identity. Until when you see the dramatic change, they exercise. Maybe they do something like a psychedelic therapy with treatment, and all of a sudden those problems like PTSD and old habits they lose their grip. And why is that? Because those things, exercise, psychedelics, even certain diets and supplements and things like that, herbs, can make your brain more neuroplastic and able to make that change. And what I'm talking about here is not what you typically would see when people are talking about your brain is kind of preventing you from manifesting. It's like, what's in the way? What you typically see is people talking about, heart-brain coherence and things like that, where your heart and your brain have to be in alignment. And that is very important, right? That's actually a main principle. But what they kind of aren't talking about is that your heart has all these neurons, neurites, that kind of are like a second brain. And then your brain has its own neurons. And then those frequencies, when they're in proper alignment, create an energetic field that can bring things to you or push things away based on, the coherence of the field and the information within your body and all that stuff. So what they're not talking about is that all of that actually has to support your brain. Your brain is like the key in this. The heart is like the master key, but every system in your body supports your brain. You can't live without your brain. You can replace your heart. You get a heart transplant, even though it's not really the best thing, I think. There's always possibility of rejection and whatnot, but you can get somebody else's heart to support your brain. But you can't get somebody else's brain to support your brain. That has never been done and never will work. You can't get somebody else's spinal cord to support your body and your brain. Never will work. So if you really want to optimize this, you have to create an internal environment that supports that neuroplasticity, that supports new brain cells, and also removes interference, which also a lot of times it's just inflammation, right? The inflammation will interfere in the communications with all of your neurons and all of your organ systems. So you have to support the whole entire body to support the brain. But when you do things like you go throughout your day, you go throughout your life, and the way you train, the way you exercise, the way that you eat, the way that you decide to live, if your practices are with the intention of removing this interference and supporting your brain, you're going to have a very different result than somebody who's doing all of those things to look a certain way, to kind of fight off a disease. Because when you try to fight a disease, what you resist persists. That actually might end up manifesting the disease. When you do that, you're going to have a very different result. And the results are going to be better health, number one, because your brain is the master controller of it all. Your brain is the filter. Your brain is the receiver for all of this stuff. And that innate intelligence out there comes through the brain, through the spinal cord. And all of those messages is what organizes your body in a certain way to be healthy. So when there's interference in that messaging, that's when we have all of these kind of sort of unfavorable disease processes that end up happening within us. And that's the same thing for manifestation, because as above, so below, as below, so above, right? So what goes on inside of you is going to show up in the simulation outside of you. And when remember I talked about that field that's created with heart-brain coherence? Well, that interference is going to show up in that energetic field. And then that interference is going to show up in ways in your reality. And it sounds very complicated, I admit, but it's actually all very simple. So when you get a cut, you don't have to think about healing that cut, right? It's an automatic function of your innate biology, of your innate system, to heal that cut without you thinking about it. The more you mess with it, the longer it's going to take. If you break a bone, the bone's not necessarily going to like heal if it's not in alignment. Put it back in alignment. The body, you just cast it. The body heals it, right? You don't have to do anything. There's things that you can maybe do to support the system, right? Peptides, diet, things like that, that'll support the system to give it what it needs, right? You're just giving it the building blocks, more raw material to fix it. So if abundance and love and these base core level frequencies are our natural state, do we need to do anything in order to experience them besides removing the interference, supporting the system, supporting your brain, supporting your biology, supporting your life, going out and doing things without fear, going out and doing the things that you know you want to be doing, right? Without judgment, from those from those base level intentions of like living your life on your own terms and supporting the system the whole way. Because as you go through that, your identity's going to change, your body's going to change, you're going to become a new person. So if you create that environment where your brain can actually make those new connections and step into the better, more an aligned identity of your highest version of yourself, don't you think that's going to go a lot easier? I think so, and I've seen it time after time again. The people who I've worked with that have the most dramatic, permanent changes in their life also are doing all these things to support the change that happens in their brain so they can lock in and step into that new identity. So I hope that this was just informative to you, that if you're having any kind of trouble in your life, kind of like changing things, you know, like the times that I've wanted to make the most change but didn't, I let my health put that on a back burner, and it was really hard for me to change, and it took a really long time until I started prioritizing my health magically, even though I have all this knowledge and I wasn't putting it to use. Because a healthy body is going to have a more neuroplastic brain, and it's going to be able to make those changes and shifts a lot easier, and it's going to have a much more clear energy field in order to make those manifestations show up in the way that they're supposed to. And just by knowing this, you now have a key, right? And if you have this knowledge and actually apply it, you're automatically going to be healthier. You're automatically going to be the person who walks in the room. First of all, you're going to also be better looking, because let's face it, you're going to have less inflammation. Your lymphatic system's going to be functioning a lot better. Your eyes are going to be brighter. Your skin's going to be brighter. You're going to be much more attractive, just physically. You're also going to be a lot more attractive energetically, emotionally, to people, to things, to situations. You could be the person that walks in the room and everybody turns their heads and they are like, who is that person? What's going on? It's got to kind of short circuit them a little bit. But that's a good thing. You want that. You want to be that person. Now that you have this knowledge, and if you start applying it, all of these things are going to start shifting for you. And every technique that you've ever learned in a YouTube video or in a book, if you have this foundational level knowledge and you're applying it, all those things are going to work 10 times better for you. And you're also going to be able to see the things that aren't going to work. You're going to stop doing those. You're going to start doing the things that are actually going to work for you. Because there's a lot of BS out there too that doesn't work. And people are susceptible to it because they're just not clear physically. Their intuition isn't tapped in because they're not clear. So hopefully this was helpful to you. If you made it this far in the video, I appreciate you. And I'll see you on the next video.